U.S. and Saudi joint strikes on Iraq. This comes after Iran did something unique. Yesterday, Iran launched a salvo of missiles in the direction of U.S. bases in Jordan. They did this unprompted. They did this without getting hit first by American forces. That was new. Iran, I believe, if this is not like a, random hardliner deciding to go beast mode in their mosaic structure, and instead is, a deliberate first strike, Iran is now moving into a different posture in this ongoing war. What do I mean by this? So far, in the last couple of months, throughout the entirety of Operation Epic Fury, also known as Epstein's Fury, Iran has always responded. Iran has always responded to strikes from the American side, strikes from the Israeli Air Force. When I say unprompted, I don't mean they're totally invalid for doing this. They're at war. But the posture from the Iranian side is changing a little bit. And it's important to recognize that. This means that they are willing to engage in non-retaliatory strikes. Up until this moment, all of their strikes were defensive. You could call it defensive. It's tit for tat. American strike Iran, or rather Iran notices America and commercial shipping being violated, like the MOU being violated, and ships transiting through the Omani coastline in the Strait of Hormuz being defended by the Americans, and they strike at those ships to keep the leverage that they have over the Strait of Hormuz and keep the MOU intact. And then America strikes at Iran directly, and then Iran strikes back at the Gulf. Now, this is a non-retaliatory strike. So the posture is different. And it's important because if this continues, that means Iran is now trying to get into the driver's seat. Because up until this moment, as I said, it was more a reactive response, a proportional reactive response from the Iranian side. This will still be proportional, of course, but instead of a retaliatory strike, this is now going to dictate the tone of the theater and give the escalation capacity to Iran. Sina Tusi also noticed this, and he reports, this would mark the first time Iran has initiated direct strikes against U.S. forces in this war. The aim may be to deny Washington to a tactical pause to let oil prices fall, sustain pressure, and preempt what many in Tehran believe could be a broader U.S. offensive. Okay? This is important. This changes the nature of this conflict from Iran behaving in a purely retaliatory manner to one where they're taking the driver's seat and increasing pressure on America, because this is a strike that requires a response from the United States of America. So what America does now, this is something that Israel does all the time, so we're used to Israel doing this. This is when Israel was striking Lebanon, for example. When the MOU was being conducted, when the MOU was being discussed, Israel would try to do additional strikes in Lebanon in an effort to see what America was willing to let Israel do, in an effort to see what Iran would do in retaliation. This is not a position of weakness, for the record. Iran's constant impulse to demonstrate escalation dominance, this is from Dr. Andreas Krieg, associate professor, saying, Iran's constant impulse to demonstrate escalation dominance isn't a sign of strength, but a deep-seated inferiority complex and trauma on which the Islamic Republic has been built. At this rate, the greatest obstacle to Iranian security isn't Israel or the U.S., it's Iranian socio-psychology. wrong. That is wrong. Sina responds to that, says, before the war, Iran's relative restraint was cited as proof that it was weak. Now its assertiveness is attributed to inferiority complex. Perhaps it's time to spend less effort psychoanalyzing Tehran and more effort understanding its strategic logic. I think Iran has shown over and over again that it is not impulsive at all. As a matter of fact, its strategic restraint was perhaps born out of naivete. This idea that the moderates or the reformists would be able to negotiate with the United States of America, with the West, with Israel, or at least not with Israel directly, but with America that is supposed to control Israel. The idea that America would treat them as a sovereign nation and not simply a nuisance that they can bomb willingly. This was wrong. The reformists and the moderates were wrong. The hardliners have been proven correct. Okay? And when I say the current reformists, they're not even real reformists. These are still previously people that were known as hardliners like Galabaf, but they're just more pragmatic. So even that is a shift in the direction of the hardliners, because the current governance structure inside of Iran, with the exception of the president and maybe Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, is mostly hardliners that are more pragmatic. So they're willing to negotiate with America at all, but still willing to fight. And the hardliners that don't want to negotiate with America at all and simply just want to fight. So there has been this consolidation of a forceful posture where the hardliners won. Part of the reason why the hardliners, quote unquote, won is because Israel killed all of the reformers. Israel killed all of the people that were always willing to negotiate with the United States of America. Now, the majority, from what I understand, is still in the hands of those who are still hardliners, but not as conservative or as invested in purely fighting. The pragmatists are still technically in control. But the way that the American side has presented this conversation makes it seem as though there is a real crisis in Iranian leadership. They've even gone so far as to lie and claim that the further right, the more right-wing elements within the IRGC have actually won. Right? Araghchi is a reformist? I know, I already brought that up. I said Pezeshkian, Araghchi, those are like the last remaining. Those are like the last remaining reformists. They're not technically hardliners, but the rest, like even Galabaf, is a more pragmatic person, but still in the past would have been considered a hardliner. Right wing is an interesting descriptor. Yeah, I don't, it doesn't fall in the same left-right dynamic. Not one reformist got killed. USA want a change of heart. Anyway, here's what's important. Here's what's important. Regardless of the way that the American side, the way that the Western world has covered this as like real chaos in the leadership structure, I don't think there's as much chaos as the way that we're coping here in the West. They definitely are working hand in glove with one another. The forceful military posture creates leverage for those who seek out negotiations. Okay? But in any case, what's important here is why Iran did this first strike, if you want to call it that. It was a non-retaliatory strike. It was an initiated direct strike against U.S. forces in this war for the first time after 150 plus days. The reason why they're doing that is because they are regaining strategic leverage over the nature of this battle. Okay? That's my speculation. I think that they are doing this to say, look, we hold the cards. Now it's up to you. Will you retaliate? Will you continue this battle? Or will you beg us to a ceasefire negotiation process once again? And this is not just my analysis. There are NATO Atlantists like Dennis Citrinowicz at the Atlantic Council who also agree with my assessment. Danny writes in Hebrew, why did Iran fire? A, the current leadership in Iran seeks to dictate the pace of the confrontation and not merely to respond to decisions made in Washington. From its perspective, an offensive initiative is a way to prove that Iran still holds the strategic initiative. That's 100% correct. They're dictating the pace of the battle now. In the past, they were simply responding. They were simply responsive. Tit for tat strikes. Iran maintains its leverage over the Strait of Hormuz. And fires at a boat that's crossing with their transponders off or crossing through the Omani coastline. America comes back in, starts fucking lasering, Iranian ports and whatnot. And then Iran retaliates by striking the Gulf and striking Jordan and striking American military installations. America in that situation is still setting the tempo. Iran is simply retaliating to American strikes. This is different. In Tehran, they identify the American hesitation as a weakness and a lack of willingness to be dragged into a broad war. And there is truth for this. There is truth to this. It's not an accident that there were more leaks about the lack of interceptor stockpiles on the American side this past week. It's not an accident, and it's not random happenstance that Donald Trump claimed he was going to pummel Iran, especially after the Ansar Allah movement also joined in on the battle, closed the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, blew up an Aramco facility in Saudi Arabia, and is striking the Yanbu ports, striking at Saudi boats if they dare try to cross the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, effectively shutting off another strait that is that the Saudis were using to transit oil through. This is a huge point of additional leverage, forcing the Saudis to utilize the Suez Canal. And that is if they are even able to get their ships out of the Yanbu ports, which is the only port that they're utilizing. Like one of the most significant port that they need to utilize to get their oil out to sea. When the Ansar Allah is hitting the Yanbu ports, when the Ansar Allah movement is hitting oil refineries inside of Saudi Arabia, Aramco facilities inside of Saudi Arabia, all of a sudden, the theater has grown. There's another front that is opened, and a second strait has closed. America was supposed to respond forcefully to this escalation, and yet they didn't. After 13 days, after ending the memorandum of understanding, for 13 days there were tit-for-tat strikes. But America stopped. This is now the third day of America not delivering a devastating blow that Donald Trump promised. And then the media articles started coming out. Why is Trump not delivering on his promise? Part of that is the pressure from the energy markets. There's only so much financial engineering that you can entertain before there is a hard stop on the strategic petroleum reserves. Okay? There's only so much financial engineering that you can engage in when we're talking about a hard commodity with a global inelastic demand. So you can hide your failure in the stock market by gaming it to the best of your ability with a million different Barack Ravid exclusives. But ultimately, ultimately, when the belt gets tightened and tightened, when there's not enough oil in the strategic petroleum reserves, and you come near that hard limit of 150 million barrels of oil, where the salt caverns are slated to collapse due to a lack of pressure, you have to do something else. That's one of the major pressures that even Trump has to recognize. Okay? That's one of the major pressures that even Trump has to deal with. Okay? Even he understands this, regardless of how stupid he is. That's one. Number two, the other pressure is the other hard limit. There's only a finite amount of munitions. There's only a finite amount of munitions for standoff munitions that America has been deploying and depleting to strike Iran because they can't utilize their air force efficiently. They haven't developed sufficient air superiority over the Iranian airspace. So they have to use these standoff munitions, Tomahawk missiles that they lob, ATACMS from Kuwait, right? And they also have a finite supply of interceptor missiles, PAC-3s, the Patriot missile systems that they have. And now they've actually started deploying PAC-2s as well, a much older version, a much worse version of the Patriot missile system, which already doesn't have a 100% interception rate regardless. Some of those PAC-3 missiles fail. We've seen one over Bahrain that failed and fell into a residential neighborhood. We don't know how many civilians that killed. Those are the two major reasons as to why Trump has not re-escalated and gone up the escalation ladder against Iran. But they cannot continue to fight. They cannot continue to fight, but they also can't concede. It's a real damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because if they concede, they tuck their tails, the Americans tuck their tails and run, okay, then it's established unambiguously that Iran now controls the Strait of Hormuz, which, 20% of the entire world's energy supply transits through. That's a huge economic advantage that Iran now has. There's a huge political advantage that Iran now has. Iran wins. America loses. So the smart alternative here is, of course, to negotiate with Iran, to beg them back to the ceasefire process, to beg them back to the negotiation process. Iran has already won. We just simply have not acknowledged it yet. And the bleeding will continue until we acknowledge that defeat. So this initiative from Iran to initiate conflict for the first time in the last 150 days is fairly significant. It means that Iran is accelerating the process of American recognition of defeat. It's forcing Americans to come to terms with the reality that they do not have the necessary interceptor supply. They're obviously not going to go beast mode and start striking Israel in this belligerent manner, because their goal is not to engage in revenge. Their goal is still fairly restrained. Their goal is to basically show America their capabilities. That's why they're striking Jordan. That's why they're not striking Israel right now. They're disabling what remains of the anti-air defense systems that exist in Jordan. America obviously had to move a lot of their assets away from the rest of the Gulf because Iran pummeled these American bases in the Gulf to Jordan. Jordan is the last line of defense for Israel. This is also part of the reason why Israel is now defending Jordan. The only other time Israel has ever utilized their own anti-air defense systems was when they sent some anti-air systems to the United Arab Emirates, to a limited degree of success. Don't strike me. No, I'm not. No, they aren't. Yes, they are. Israeli interceptors are being activated over Jordanian airspace to defend the American military bases inside of Jordan. Why would they do that? Why are you so confident that you know what Iran's goals are in this conflict? Because I'm a secret Shia 12er, okay? And a practicer of taqiyya and a prominent member of the Islamic Republic. I am one of the 88 clerics. I don't know. Maybe I'm confident that I know what Iran's goals are in this conflict because I have a brain and I'm analyzing what they've done so far. I'm looking at their historical patterns. I'm looking at the internal conflict that might exist, the ideological disagreements that might exist within the governance structure of Iran. It's not like they're hiding it. It's the same with China. When people say, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? How do you know what China's going to do? How are you so confident about what China's going to do? Well, they write it down. They write it down all the time. They're pretty open about it. It's like Babe Ruth. They called their shots ahead of time. We don't listen. We don't take it seriously. And then we're shocked when it happens. And the same goes for Iran. The major difference between myself and many other analysts and those in the commentary sphere is that when Iran says something, I listen to what they have to say. If there is a logical through line with what they're saying and what they're doing, if there's a connection between the two, I take note of that and I remember that the next time around. Iran has shown unbelievable restraint, so much so that that level of strategic restraint was seen as a weakness for the longest time. As an Iranian, you are so correct about your analysis of Iran. I can tell you that. Thank you. Early on in Epic Fury, all of the Western commentariat was confused. They were like, why is Iran striking the Gulf? Those are their neighbors. They're all Muslim. Isn't that stupid? Look at this idiot. Look at this stupid country Iran. What did I say? I said they're hitting American bases. They're striking at missiles that are coming from the Gulf. Of course they're going to do that. Their goal was clear, to shut off America's eyes and ears in the region. They struck at the radar systems. They struck at American military personnel. None of that was a waste. There was a deliberate design to the Iranian retaliation. They were defending themselves and establishing sufficient military deterrence. And I was right. All those other guys were like, oh, you're so dumb. Oh, the Gulf is going to hate Iran forever. The Gulf is going to hate Iran forever. Iran is striking the Gulf, they said. I told you that the message for the Gulf nations was very clear. Get these American bases out. And it turns out I was right. Many in the Gulf want to get these American bases now out. That's part of the reason why America's talking about entertaining putting their entire central command, their entire operational structure inside of Israel now. Here's another version of those events. Hundreds of Jordanian political, legal, and other figures signed an open letter last week calling for the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Jordan in a rare public challenge to the government, which has long cracked down on free speech and dissent. Anecdotally, my experience is that these operations against Iran in defense of Israel are overwhelmingly opposed by the people in Jordan. You have to remember, a lot of these Gulf nations, and also Jordan as well, they're not real democracies. They're not democratic at all. They're run by fucking kings. Jordan is run by a British puppet. So the Jordanian population's attitude towards what's going on, the Jordanian population's attitude towards like being the last line of defense against Israel is not exactly popular by the Jordanians themselves. They don't want that. Same with Bahrain. Same with even the United Arab Emirates, which we, often joke about and say is the most Israeli country. It's the Arab version of Israel. But even amongst the Emirates, the population doesn't want, many people in the population don't want to be the last line of defense for Israel. They don't want to be a missile sponge at the behest of Israel. Why would you want that? So, yeah, as Danny was saying, in Tehran, they identify the American hesitation as weakness and a lack of willingness to be dragged into a broad war. The Iranian assessment is that applying additional pressure will precisely test Washington's resolve and influence decision-making in the White House. They want to remind America that they actually hold the cards. They control the tempo. This is a big deal. From Iran's point of view, Danny continues, the naval blockade is no longer just a means of pressure, but an actual declaration of war. Unlike the past, the current leadership is not prepared to accept damage to its freedom of action in the Gulf without a significant response. D, there is a direct connection between today's attacks and the activities of pro-Iranian militias in Iraq against Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. From Tehran's perspective, these are different fronts of the same campaign, whose goal is to reshape the balance of power in the Middle East and erode the status of the United States and its allies. E, this is also further evidence of change in Iran's doctrine following the rise of Khamenei. If in the past the emphasis was mainly on response and deterrence, today Iran is also prepared to initiate offensive moves and to rely deeply on its missile array, drones, and regional proxies. In Tehran, they see an opportunity to reshape the strategic reality in the Gulf to their advantage. The ball is now back in Washington's court. In Iran, they assess that a limited American response will not change the reality. And in the end, the United States will be required to decide whether it escalates the campaign, knowing that every escalation is expected to be met with further Iranian escalation. They're making the American campaign more costly. They're accelerating the process of American recognition of defeat. America's already lost. It's now up to our leaders to come to terms with that reality. So Iran is making it more costly. Iran is agitating with pinpoint accuracy. So it's not even about ballistic missiles being launched from Iran and then successfully striking U.S. targets inside of Jordan. It's the act of launching ballistic missiles alone that is applying pressure, that's changing the tempo, that's giving Iran control over this conflict. Iran is now saying, we are no longer going to hold back and wait for American retaliation, or we're no longer going to hold back and wait for America to strike Iran. We will control the tempo, and we will see how you respond. Bottom line, the attack is further proof that Iran has no intention of surrendering and is not acting out of distress or a desire to beg for negotiations. On the contrary, the leadership in Tehran is prepared to take significant risks because it sees the current confrontation as a decisive battle over its regional status and its ability to shape the security reality in the Middle East. Now, that's important. That's important. It's important to understand. There's also one other element that Danny is not factoring here. This is not simply to reshape the security realities in the region. This is still an existential threat. Because as long as the American-Israeli security partnership remains, as long as Israel still gets to dictate the terms of American military action in the region, there will always be an existential threat to Iran. They have to eradicate it. They have to take out the different tentacles of this American imperialist endeavor in the region. They have to take out the bases. They have to make it as costly for the United States of America to continue operating in the region. And they've been doing that. They've been doing that with their successive strikes on American military installations, on American radar installations. They're creating an environment of pressure for the Gulf nations so that the Gulf nations let up and decide to tell America that this security partnership that America and the Gulf nations have created is not actually helpful for them. Okay? That's one element. The other element is just to directly destroy their supply, to directly destroy the American assets in the region, which they've been doing as well. There's also one other point. What is this? Check out this take from someone at the Atlantic Council. The Iran war has only exacerbated long-standing flaws in the U.S. security approach to the Gulf. It's past time for the U.S. to shed ambiguous security guarantees and embrace a more collaborative approach. What does that collaboration mean? To be more aggressive in our posture and just invade Iran militarily? By the way, 48 seconds remaining on level 2 hype train. The Piker Broadcasting Service is sponsored by you, the people, for you, the people. If we get to level 10 hype train, we carry the flame, as you guys already know. We haven't gotten to level 10 hype train and carry the flame, even though I have so many new Charlie Kirk AI songs out there that I haven't played in the last week or so. 20 seconds remaining on the level 2 hype train. You can subscribe for $6 or for free. It's the only way to support the show. 10 seconds remaining. Or gift subs. Will we carry the flame, or will the flame perish once again? Boom! Level 3 hype train. NB Radicat with the 20 gifted subs. Fox Clown with the 10 gifted subs. Ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, and MBs, will we carry the flame today? Level 4 complete already. You ignored the 10 when he came back. Tamana. Planned attack. Thank you for the 5. At level 20, you will get a tank top stream. Level 10, you carry the flame. Level 20, you get a tank top stream. Balls in your court. What Kami says. Thank you for the 20 gifted subs. Little B Stan, thank you for the 10 gifted subs. Say wallahi, wallahi. This is in my local St. Louis news. Deported St. Louis County couple shot dead. Oh, yeah, I know. I'm going to get to that as well. Gray Violet. Zelensky is high. According to CSIS, this would be roughly half of the U.S.'s entire remaining inventory of Patriot interceptors. President Zelensky has asked President Trump for an emergency winter package of 300 Patriot interceptor missiles, Axios reports. Zelensky said Ukraine's stocks are nearly exhausted and warned Russia's strikes could leave millions without heat this winter. The math doesn't add up. Air defense doctrine requires at least 2 interceptors for each incoming projectile. 3 to 5 attacks per month at 30 to 40 missiles per attack is 180 to 400 interceptors needed per month. Russian attacks will certainly increase in frequency and size during the lead up to winter. Mr. President. PMY Gurumi. It's socialism or barbarism. Level 7 hype train, ladies and gentlemen. PMY Gurumi. PWNY Gurumi. Thank you for the 25 gifted subs. At level 25, you'll call Trump? No. We're not doing that. We got to go way higher than level 25 for me to call Trump. Let's be real. Level 25, I'll do a workout stream. Fuck it. Why not? Kawuki, the smoking pun. That timeline doesn't work. Zelensky said, we need the Patriots yesterday. He's seeking 300 of them by winter. He said Trump promised he would try to help, but also made it clear it's difficult because of the need for interceptors in the war with Iran. Yeah. It's just ironic that he's asking for additional interceptors while simultaneously expanding the theater of conflict in Iran and only continuing the Iranian battle further. As I said yesterday, the more the Iranian war continues, the less likely it is that you are receiving interceptors, Zelensky. This is why I said it's dumb. This is why I said it's fucking stupid to try to strike Iranian tankers or Iranian ships, commercial ships in the Caspian Sea, to try to make yourself more useful to an insane person like Donald Trump. It made a lot more sense for you to say, look, we are very capable of defending against drone strikes, far better than the Gulf nations. We will give you our expertise. That was smart. Trump obviously didn't give a shit about the smart move, the smart initiative from Zelensky to make himself more reliable, more valuable to the American side. And instead, he did the dumb thing. Yeah. U.S.-owned LNG carrier was hit by a drone at the Egyptian port of Damietta in the Mediterranean Sea, possibly Energo's Winter, operated by Wilhelmsen Ship Management Limited USA, that have left the port following the reported attack and is now anchored off the coast. Tell me again about how pipelines circumventing the Strait of Hormuz will mean game over for Iran. Yeah. They have the reach. They have the reach, and this is why the other side, like the other axis of resistance militias, are also an important part of the Iranian security package, the Iranian security assurances. This is how they change the security environment in the region to their benefit. Okay, we're almost done with level 8 on the hype train, ladies and gentlemen. Almost done at level 8 on the hype train. Do we carry the flame or not? From the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean, the conflict is expanding. Such is the regional war Trump mindlessly started in February. If tankers can be struck here, traffic entering from the Red Sea or transiting the canal itself is at risk, especially bad for European energy security. Slowly but surely, they're expanding. Slowly but surely, they're increasing the pressure. This will make it far more costly for America, whose primary goal here as the hegemonic superpower is to make sure that people can fucking trade with ease. America, remember, doesn't just have the ambition of like destroying Iran. America obviously also has additional roles to play. One of the most important roles that America has as the hegemonic superpower is to allow free commerce, free flow of trade, is to assure that security for the rest of the world. Otherwise, your military might means nothing. And if you can't achieve that through a military campaign, you have to achieve that through negotiations. Yeah, I too remember when Macron said, we can do amazing things in Iran. I remember that. It turns out those things were not so amazing. All right, we're at level 9 hype train, almost halfway. Ladies and gentlemen, keep up the gifted subs. Yeah, Phytux reports 2 ballistic missiles out of Yazd, Iran, destination unknown. Isn't our dollar basically backed by the idea of us guaranteeing free-flowing trade? To a certain degree, yes. It's backed by the confidence that people have in America maintaining global stability with its superior military. Okay? All of the, like this entire back and forth battle, diminishing stockpiles, America not following through on their security promises to all these countries in the region. All of this actually has destroyed the confidence that people have in America remaining the hegemonic superpower. If America can't protect the petrodollar, what can it protect? Bonzer Barry says the first step is accepting the Strait of Hormuz is lost. European allies are refusing to support a U.S. push to create a joint Strait of Hormuz patrol until they see an enduring ceasefire in the Iran war. The latest sign that Washington's repeated bashing of its closest friends has carried consequences. No, I don't think they're puppies, okay? European leaders are servile dogs. They would willingly follow Trump, regardless of the way Trump talks about them or talks to them. The reason why they're not doing this is because they understand the situation. They understand the dynamic. They understand that there is no benefit to sending naval assets to the Strait of Hormuz when America can't even guarantee trade security to the oil tankers, to the to the shipments that are trying to transit the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran is still clearly peppering those ships with drones.